Little boys often have difficulty telling the time, even with Mickey Mouse watches, but they always know when it's bonfire night. It's easy, really, because bonfire night comes between conker time and Christmas. So they start getting ready. There's an old rhyme that goes, "Remember, remember the 5th of November." And in this little boy's part of the world, they really do remember. He lives in the Sussex town of Lewes, and in Lewes, they've never forgotten. Lewes was in existence long before Guy Fawkes blew his attempt to blow up the Houses of Parliament. And like many other English towns, it had seen Protestant martyrs burned at the stake. In a country torn by religious differences, it wasn't surprising that Lewes produced mobs who were ready to set almost anything on fire. But the Lewes lads were frighteningly enthusiastic. They were called the Bonfire Boys, and so riotous were they that eventually they were brought under a sort of control with the formation of bonfire societies. There are still 6 such societies in the town, and every 5th of November, their members turn out in torchlit thousands. They're pretty well behaved nowadays, but were a bit of a handful in the 19th century. Jim Etherington of the Cliffe Society tells how it was.
Quite a few local justices were assaulted, and special constables were sworn in to control the riots. And in 1847, the authorities made sort of their last attempt to suppress the celebrations. But the support that it had in the town, and it would appear that the support came from the conservative, sort of politically conservative people in the town, and also tradesmen. Rather than see it suppressed, they organised it on a more well-organised style. There seems to be some suggestion that the Conservatives, that there were sort of people behind the scenes giving the riot, the more riotous element of the celebrations a nudge to have a go at the Liberals, because the people whose houses were attacked, and there was only 2 or 3 instances of this, were in fact leading Liberals in the town.
In what spirit do you march through Lewes in these days? I mean, is there any political feeling, for example?
Not really, not amongst the actual people taking part. What we try to do is to keep alive what we see as a tradition, where the firework set piece is what we call the tableau, has got some political content. The political content this year was fashioned in a secret shed on the outskirts of Lewes, where hands had long been busily at work depicting Mrs. Thatcher's famously crisp hairstyle. Fireworks, placed in parts of her body that even the cabinet hadn't seen, were ready to detonate her to destruction. But why pick on poor Maggie?
It seemed the obvious thing to do this year.
Why is it obvious?
Well, all the cartoons are of Margaret Thatcher, and the cuts that she will be holding axes in her hands and chopping through buildings representing social services, old people's homes, and all the things that are pretty topical at this moment.
Is this a bit of a laugh for the society, or is there a serious vein of protest behind the effigy?
Basically a laugh. We've chosen many subjects just for a laugh, and some are serious comments, but basically it's a laugh. We did Armine a few years ago, which was very popular with all of the people, it seems. But if we can do a subject, a person that a lot of people object to, then we get much more support than for anything else.
What will happen to the lady on the night?
She'll be full of fireworks, and after parading around the town, she'll go up in fire.
When that actually happens, will you have any regret that your work's being destroyed, or how would you feel?
That's the best part of it. After working down here for 2 months, that's just about all you want to do with it.
In another shed, members of the Cliffe Bonfire Society looked almost as conspiratorial as Guy Fawkes and his men. They were hacking up pieces of sacking to make about 700 torches for their members. In all, well over 3,000 would be blazing on the night. The bonfire boys of today are not the violent hooligans of past centuries, but they do admit to quite strong feelings of rivalry between them and the other societies. And they do cling to the tradition of electing members to such old offices as the captain of effigies and the captain of tar barrels. As for religion today, well, why do they burn the effigy of a pope?
There really is a traditional element. We burn Pope Paul V, who was the Pope on the throne at the time of the Gunpowder Plot. And as I said earlier, during the 19th century, there was a strong anti-Catholic feeling within the celebrations, and there was no popery banners carried. The speeches by the mock clergy were always very anti-Catholic, and the papacy was seen as an alien political force, and they didn't want them, sort of encroaching into Britain. Today, that's become more of a traditional element. We don't hold those views at the present time.
Is it fairly parochial and exclusive? I mean, supposing a stranger came to live in Lewes, could he get into a bonfire society?
It's very easy to get in. All you have to do is come along and pay a subscription. But if you talk to newcomers to the town, they see it as being a very introverted, almost closed shop. They think it is difficult to get into the societies. I suppose that's really because I suppose it's like any organisation. You get cliques and groups of people who don't intentionally close themselves off from other people, from newcomers, but it just happens that way.
Can you remember how you got involved with the society and why?
Oh, stems from a long time ago. I started off life with another of the societies in the town. As a youngster, you're put into a society that your family's gone with year after year. But when I was about 16, 17, the Cliffe had the appeal for me, being more of a traditional society. More of the other societies were losing the traditional aspect, and I decided to come over to the Cliffe.
On the night, can you say what you get out of the occasion?
Sheer exhilaration. It's very hard to explain. There is something we call a bonfire atmosphere, and you get totally taken up in it. I've got colleagues who come up to me and speak to me on the night, and, who are you, sort of thing. It's very hard to say quite what it is, but there's a great feeling of being part of it.
The lady may not be for turning, but she was certainly for burning in the last night, and thousands turned out to take part in the ritual sacrifice. It was a crowd that any soccer manager would have been proud to see in the stadium, and they processed round and round the town, anticipating the climax of the evening. The torchlight and the costumes harked back centuries to a more primitive society and a rougher form of justice. Fun, a harmless tradition, or a purging of man's darker, more primeval nature?
Go the other way again.